According to Chinese legend, the universe was originally a chaotic primordial stew, a formless expanse of infinite potential. This was all that existed until, one day, a being emerged from this chaotic soup and made the most significant contribution to the formation of the world by separating the heavens from the earth. This understanding of a world existing between heaven above and earth below became a staple of Chinese cosmology. For the Chinese, what was not the universe, the earth, or the nebulous concept of the world as we know it today, but Tianxia, which literally means under heaven. Everything that ever existed or would exist took place in the dimension between heaven and earth, the realm of material beings like humans. The realm above was for the spiritual and metaphysical elements, while the world below was reserved for the more corporeal, tangible elements. This dimensional plane between heaven and earth was where humans lived, physically boarded in on four sides by the leftover primordial stew that boxed them into the domain of Tianxia. To the east lay the Pacific Ocean, a seawall of endless nothingness. To the south, the dense, inhospitable, impassable, malaria-ridden jungles of Southeast Asia. To the west, the Tibetan Plateau, where the Himalayas sewed the earth and the heavens together. And to the north, were the never-ending, rolling grasslands of the Eurasian steppe mixed with the icy Siberian tundra. On all sides, the land of Tianxia was encased by primordial elements. For the inhabitants, the land between heaven and earth was all that existed, and it was this land that would become home to the Middle Kingdom. This Middle Kingdom, emerging from this landscape, came to see itself as the only civilization that existed, and it was this human civilization that connected the primordial material world, represented by the earth, to the metaphysical, spiritual domain represented by the sky, otherwise known as God in Chinese. It is from this heavenly realm where China would receive the supernatural elements that would imbue its civilization to life. In the beginning, the giant named Pangu, who had held the earth separate from the sky for 18,000 years, died, and his body parts transformed into the elements of the natural world: mountains, rivers, his voice as thunder, his eyes as the sun and moon, his blood as the rivers and seas, and his breath as the wind. However, because Pangu died, the pillars that held up the sky from the earth were weakened, threatening to collapse. This is where the goddess, Nuwa, came into the world to repair the pillars of heaven, ensuring that earth remained separate from the sky. According to the Huainanzi, a 1st century BC text that explains Chinese folk religion, quote, "Going back to more ancient times, the 4 pillars were broken, the 9 provinces were in tatters, heaven did not completely cover the earth. Earth did not hold up heaven all the way around its circumference. Fires blazed out of control and could not be extinguished. Water flooded in great expanses and would not recede. Ferocious animals ate blameless people. Predatory birds snatched the elderly and the weak. Thereupon, Nuwa smelted together 5 colored stones in order to patch up the azure sky." End quote. The 5 colored stones created by Nuwa represented the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, which would help give the world its form and would become the basis of how the Chinese interpreted the material world. Nuwa is depicted as being half human, the lower half of her body being that of a snake. In pictures, she is often shown sharing her body with her brother/husband, Fuxi. The origin of the Chinese people can be traced back to the Yellow River and its yellow earth, which Nuwa used to create yellow clay human figures, while her brother Fuxi breathed life into them, allowing them to become alive. Fuxi led the newly made humans by teaching them everything they needed to live. He taught them how to fish with nets, hunt with traps, domesticate animals, and make tools. He also imparted the teachings of heaven in the form of the Bagua, a system of divination that would form the foundation of various Chinese philosophies like Taoism, Chinese medicine, Feng Shui, alchemy, astronomy, and martial arts. Fuxi became one of what would later be known as the 3 sovereigns, demigods worshipped as cultural heroes and pillars of Chinese civilization. During this time, another figure emerged called the Flame Emperor, also known as the Divine Farmer. He taught the Chinese about agriculture, showing them the best way to plant and cultivate grains and other crops, while also providing them with various farm tools. He was also credited with teaching the Chinese about herbal medicine. According to the legendary historian Sima Qian, before Shennong, the methods Fuxi had taught for feeding themselves were insufficient, leaving the people sickly and poverty-stricken. To remedy this, experimented with plants, consuming hundreds, many of which were poisonous, to determine which were edible and which were inedible. He ultimately learned which plants were beneficial for health and which were easiest to grow. The power of the Flame Emperor lasted for 17 generations. At this time, there were two tribes living by the Yellow River, one controlled by the Flame Emperor and the other by one known as the Yellow Emperor. The Yellow River region then became contested between the Yellow Emperor and the Flame Emperor, leading to the first large-scale battle in Chinese history, in which the Flame Emperor was forced to flee the Yellow River area. He took some followers and fled south as pastoral nomads, ultimately becoming the origin of the Vietnamese, Tibetan, and Burmese people who venerate him as their founding ancestor. With the Yellow Emperor firmly in control of the Yellow River region, he tamed the often flooding Yellow River by dredging and redirecting the water into channels, allowing Chinese agriculture to blossom. This agricultural boom greatly increased the population, sowing the seeds of Chinese civilization. The prosperity of the Yellow River region gave rise to a cosmopolitan culture, and the most pronounced feature of this culture was the beautiful clothing worn particularly by the women. The people of this civilization came to be known as the Huaxia people, meaning beautifully clothed people. Huaxia is the original term for what it means to be Chinese, a beautifully clothed person descended from the Yellow River Valley region. These beautifully clothed people of the Yellow River became distinct from those living outside this civilization, who still had the trappings of a primordial way of life. These outsiders were derisively known as barbarians, or in Chinese, Hu, which means beard, in contrast to the shaven Huaxia people. The Huaxia people lived in what was known as the Xia dynasty, which was founded by the Yellow Emperor. The homeland of the Xia, and thus Chinese people, was on both sides of the Yellow River, in the province we now call Henan and Hebei, literally south of the river and north of the river. Hebei and Henan make up what is known as the Central Plain, which is the birthplace of Chinese civilization and was thought of as the center of the entire world. While the existence of legendary demigods like the Yellow Emperor remains a topic of debate amongst historians, their stories have been deeply woven into the fabric of Chinese cultural identity. The Yellow Emperor, for instance, is not only seen as a mythical ruler, but also as a progenitor of Chinese civilization, a symbol of unity and order. These legends served as more than just tales. They were integral in shaping the collective consciousness of Chinese people, providing a shared narrative that connected them to their past. The Xia dynasty exists on the cusp of legend and history. It marks the beginning of China's dynastic period. The Shang and Zhou dynasties, with their advancements in writing, bronze technology, and social organization, represent a clearer and more documented era in Chinese history. It is during these times that the early foundations of Chinese statehood, culture, and governance were firmly established, transitioning from the mythic to the historical. As ages passed and the Shang dynasty emerged from the Xia, a cult developed around the foundation of Huaxia civilization and its demigod founder, the Yellow Emperor, who tamed the Yellow River and built the world as they knew it. The Yellow Emperor came to be worshipped as a divine figure and the connection between man and God, or heaven and earth, and thus he became known as the Son of Heaven, or Tianzi. It was during this time that emperors began to see their divine right to rule as stemming from their lineage, which they tried in earnest to trace back to the Yellow Emperor. Consequently, emperors came to be seen as the living embodiment of God on earth, and a cult of personality would swirl around those who held the position throughout the rest of history. The emperor's role as the ruler of Tianxia was seen as being the mediator between heaven and earth, maintaining the balance and harmony of the world. This concept justified the emperor's supreme authority and the hierarchical structure of society, where everything had its proper place in the grand order of the universe. The well-being of the entire realm depended on the emperor's ability to govern justly and maintain the mandate of heaven, a divine right to rule that could be withdrawn if the emperor failed in his duties. Furthermore, Tianxia influenced Chinese diplomacy and foreign relations. The Middle Kingdom saw itself as the cultural and moral center of the world, and surrounding states and people were considered part of this broader Tianxia system. These barbarian states were expected to recognize the superiority of Chinese civilization and pay tribute to the emperor, acknowledging his role as the ruler of all under heaven. In return, they were granted peace, stability, and the benefits of Chinese culture and trade. This tributary system reinforced the idea that China was the epicenter of a vast interconnected world with the emperor as the unifying force. The Shang dynasty is often credited with the development of some of the earliest forms of Chinese writing. This writing system emerged from the use of what are called oracle bones, animal bones or turtle shells used for the purpose of divination as supposedly taught by the demigod Fuxi. It marks one of the oldest known continuous writing systems in the world. The Shang people would inscribe questions on these bones and then apply heat until they cracked. The patterns formed by the cracks were interpreted by fortune tellers who believed they could reveal the will of the gods. In the following Zhou dynasty, Confucius formulated the philosophy that would govern the morality of the people, emphasizing natural hierarchies in society, from children to parents, wife to husband, servant to master, with the emperor or son of heaven placed at the top of this structure. Taoism would also emerge to the fore, promoting the idea of living in harmony with the Tao, or the natural way of the universe, influencing Chinese thought, art, and spirituality. After the collapse of the Zhou into the Warring States period, a state known as the Qin was able to conquer and reunite many of the disparate kingdoms after 5 centuries of turmoil. This Qin dynasty, although short-lived, would centralize the state and would become the first dynasty of Imperial China. The name of this new Qin imperial kingdom would spread far and wide, where it would reach the Sanskrit-speaking people of Eurasia, where it would become the word Sina. This would be the origin of our word China in English. The emperor, Qin Shi Huang, also undertook the ambitious project of building the Great Wall to protect the northern frontier against the northern barbarians. Although much of the wall that exists today was built in later dynasties, the Qin set the precedent for the massive engineering project, which would become one of the most iconic symbols of China. Although the Qin reunified China, it had done so with the help of tyrannical measures to bolster the power of the state against its neighbors, and thus was a very hated regime. In the ensuing rebellion, only 30 years after the state's founding, a new dynasty led by the leader of the state of Han came out on top of the Qin to overthrow the tyrannical regime. Under Emperor Wu, Confucianism was adopted as the state philosophy, replacing the more legalistic and authoritarian practices of the Qin. The Han was also responsible for the establishment of the Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes that connected China to the Mediterranean, Central Asia, India, and beyond. The Han dynasty's influence on Chinese identity is perhaps most evident in the fact that the majority ethnic group in China today refers to themselves as Han Chinese, and the Chinese language is often called the Han language. This speaks to the profound and lasting impact of the Han dynasty on Chinese national consciousness. The Han period is often seen as the defining era that solidified what it means to be Chinese, blending the cultural, philosophical, and political developments of earlier periods into a cohesive identity. The Han dynasty's policies of cultural assimilation and expansion also played a role in shaping the Chinese nation. The Han Empire expanded its territory, incorporating diverse peoples and cultures into the Chinese state. This expansionist policy, coupled with the promotion of a unified cultural identity based on Confucian ideals, helped to create a sense of unity and continuity that has persisted throughout Chinese history. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you like my channel, consider subscribing to my Patreon page to help this channel keep going, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.